Alex, are you ready to record a podcast that's based on a short story that I wrote, but that's actually based on the movie that I also wrote?
Yeah, I think so, because I think this sounds like we're ready for our Wes Anderson episode. So, this is Alex from Los Angeles.
And this is Karan from Los Angeles. Welcome to Movies That Shaped Us. We're two longtime friends who grew up on opposite ends of the globe with very different backgrounds, but were both shaped and are still being shaped by the movies we see and love. In each episode, we will cover a filmmaker who shaped our love of movies. Join us as we explore why they matter and review the three movies in the filmography that made the biggest impact on us.
Yeah, so this is another one of our favorite directors releasing a new movie, Phoenician Scheme. So, very excited to delve more into Wes Anderson and the film. But why don't we start with Wes Anderson before we get into Phoenician Scheme? What are your Wes Anderson thoughts and relationship with him as a director and his films?
Yeah, I feel like I'm not alone in this, but I feel like there are few directors, at least in our lifetime, or maybe in the catalog of directors ever, who have such a signature film language and vocabulary that even if you're not a movie person, you kind of know what a Wes Anderson movie evokes,
Hmm.
for better or for worse, and we'll get into that at least in my thoughts of how some of that Wes Anderson-ness is almost hurting these movies in a way because there's so much of like expectation. Oh, this is exactly what it's going to be. But I digress. But I think he's one of the best directors that's been out there, ever, honestly. Like nobody has been able to match this sophistication in terms of conveying emotions, human relationships, but telling them in a way that just is so unique. Obviously, the
Hmm.
production design, the symmetry, the music. I mean, he's one of the great directors of choosing the best music there ever is in his movies. But I think there's a very peculiar way of communicating these emotions. They're often deadpan, they're communicated by in a very upfront, dry kind of way, which when you're watching them, they almost feel like dioramas. They feel like engaging new worlds that are often inhabited by some of your favorite actors. That's another signature of his, where he's
Yep.
always assembling amazing crews of actors. But it's only later once you watch his movie is when you start to kind of grapple with the depth of what it is that is trying to say. And there's so many layers. I mean, the whole nested doll structure of storytelling, which he's sort of been doing more of as he's gone ahead, I guess, barring this new movie, it's actually very true with the emotional core of the movie as well, because there's so much. You can just admire the beauty of it, or you can really try to, look for the depth that he's kind of, grappling with. So yeah, he's in my top tier directors. I will say, like a lot of people, I feel like my relationship with him has changed over time, where I obviously came to his movies later in life, and we'll talk about sort of my first love and what have
Hmm.
you, and was drawn to them. And then a big moment happened with Budapest where everybody was in the camp, and I was in the camp too. And then I went back and watched a lot of stuff, liked some, didn't like some. And then over time, even the stuff that I didn't like have started to appreciate it more and more. But then off late, I also started to maybe get a little bit caught up with the overarching sort of impression and opinion in pop culture about him that, oh, these movies look the same. It's too much of the Russian doll structure, blah, blah, blah. They look beautiful, they're immaculate, but is there depth here? Is there substance here? And I don't know. I'm here to say that let Wes do what he wants to do, first of all, because
Uh-huh.
he's amazing and he's a signature artist. But I think these movies, these last three movies, and we'll obviously talk about Phoenician Scheme, are probably some of his deepest works. Maybe they're too sophisticated for his own good, but there's a lot that's going on. So yeah, I'll end on this that I'm excited to see that a director who has had so much success could basically retire or do whatever he wants to do. And the truth is, he's doing what he wants to do, but he's not taken an easy, safe path. These movies are incredibly hard to make. And as he's gotten older, the subject matter of his movies has gotten only deeper and
Yeah.
deeper. And I love that for any artist out there, especially someone like Wes. So all this to say, he's sort of in the pantheon of my directors, and I don't even approach it from that, oh, I'm some quirky person and I love all symmetrical miniature quirky things. No, I'm not that person. I love him for the artist he is, the signature style that he has, and the depth of emotion and human relationship he's able to communicate in really unique, entertaining ways. Does it get a little bit, grating at times? Yes. But then you go back and watch it and you discover gems in that too. What about you?
Yeah, for me, I've been a huge fan since we'll talk about my first love, but it's Rushmore, a movie we've talked about in the podcast before, is a really important movie to me just as a film fan coming to it when remember seeing it in theaters, and immediately I was drawn to the artistry of what Wes does. And we've talked about, I think it was about a year ago, we covered Tim Burton,
Mm,
which was an important person for me as a child, being able to recognize a signature style of, okay, well, I know what Tim Burton kind of looks like. And then for me, I feel like Wes Anderson was not like at that point, I know what a director was, it was in high school, but this was more like, I don't mean this in a pejorative way, but like baby's first auteur director. Like this
hmm.
was when I was like, okay, now I know what an auteur means, where you can really tell that the style visually is a specific type of director, but there's also themes that tie back into that style that come up every single time of family members in crisis, or people
Yep.
that for distant and can't really attach to their emotions, and they're dealing with some trauma that happened to them, but they don't really know how to deal with it directly. And then seeing how the artifice that is created around these worlds that he constructs is a way to not address a thing that you want to express as these characters do. A lot of these characters in his films have rules that they're following, maps that they're creating, blueprints, checklists, like all these things that are very structured because they can't deal with the things they can't control, like other people's emotions or even their own emotions. They don't know how to really express them, so they're putting all these things around them as this artifice. So even as a teenager, I was able to see the artifice and kind of connect it back to the themes that what is going on in the films. So I really was starting to understand, oh, this is what like an auteur director, writer director is. And especially these early films of West, which I feel were the ones that he wrote with Owen Wilson, there was this real sense of heart, where there really are, and sincerity, that where they're wearing their emotions in their sleeve and they don't fully are able to express them. And those really, really touched me. And I followed his career ever since Rushmore, and been yeah, just a huge fan of the aesthetic of his soundtracks, especially those early ones who was incorporating pop
Hmm.
music, 60s British, pop rock into the soundtracks. Huge fan of that. And even though he went off in some different directions and kind of, I think, left that phase of his career behind him, I was still followed him with in all the different things that he would do. I don't think he's ever really made like a bad movie. Like I will show up opening night to anything that Wes Anderson does.
Yep.
I even went. I was in Milan a couple years ago, and there's a specific cafe where he actually designed the whole cafe. So you can go in
Oh,
there, and it's like
wow.
the artifice was him. All the menus are like in sort of his style. I mean, again, he's such a style. You can imagine exactly what this looks like. But it's the first time he's involved in making a physical space that you could go to. So yeah, I'm as much as a fan. I'm like, oh, I'm going to Milan. There's a couple things you got to see. But I gotta go to the Wes Anderson Cafe, and it was like being inside of his world is so cool, and it's just really amazing that he's able to go between these different mediums too of live action, but then the stop motion animation. I think that's a genre that doesn't really get a lot of love nowadays, but it really fits again that controlling nature. And then it's really cool to
Hmm.
see after his first stop motion film, him bringing those aesthetics into live action. I mean, in a way, his movies felt kind of stop motion in a way to begin with, in terms of how controlling his environments are. But after the Fantastic Mr. Fox, just interesting to see how more controlling they got, and which again, it always to me connects back to these themes of these characters that cannot be expressive. And that's why I think a lot of people criticize him as like style over substance. But I think I see his films as style because you don't want to deal with the substance. And it like
Hmm.
squeaks out sometimes, even at the end of these films where, a typical movie, there might be this huge cathartic, big scene where the characters are finally realizing something, expressing this deep emotion, and there's this big, showy piece. Here it's just like tiny little things where you see the characters are changing, and they still can't express fully how they're feeling and the arc that they've been on. But there's just enough there that I'm like, oh wow, there's a huge change in this person, even though they can't fully express it yet. There's enough there where you're seeing the growth and the connection that was maybe broken in a family or a friendship or relationship. And so I do, like you said, I think these movies are very powerful the more you watch them because it is
Hmm.
easy to be distracted by the facade and the mise en scène and the production design and the art direction and the camera movements and everything, which are all incredible and I love all that. But there's something behind it. It's not just mise en scène for mise en scène's sake, basically. And so
Yeah.
that's why he always will be one of my favorite directors.
Yeah. So speaking of, what did you think of his new movie, The Phoenician Scheme?
Yes, this brand new movie just came out. I think it was released in LA first, and now it's going wide. So this movie is described on IMDb as a wealthy businessman, Zaza Korda, appoints his only daughter, a nun, as sole heir to his estate. As Korda embarks on a new enterprise, they soon become the target of scheming tycoons, foreign terrorists, and determined assassins. Obviously directed and co-written by Wes Anderson, starring Benicio del Toro, Mia Threppleton, and Michael Cera a bunch of other people too. I mean, obviously his movies are, wide, big casts. But for me, this movie was great. It delivered on everything that I was looking for in a Wes Anderson movie. And frankly, like I haven't been connecting a lot with the last two films. I was not a huge fan of French Dispatch. Asteroid City is growing a little bit in the last couple years for me, but this movie to me is back to classic Wes Anderson. And what I loved about this film was that it was going back to, yes, it's an ensemble, like I mentioned, but really it's a relationship about a father and his daughter. And it's simplifying down to these two characters who you follow throughout the entire piece that you really get a sense over time of this relationship being something that the father has not really always been there. It's an estranged daughter. And I love how he is trying to come to terms with what he actually feels about his daughter, trying to bring her back into the fold, and also see his own evolution of what he thinks is important. I mean, he starts out the movie very much this ruthless businessman, and the arc that he goes on, especially professionally, which we'll get into a bit in terms of what I think is a bit of a like political message of the film. I just thought was really touching and life affirming of like he's doing something he actually loves. And it's his own, work that is going into this instead of, exploiting all these other people and these different schemes. I mean, the movie's literally called Scheme, which implies someone who doesn't, isn't really doing something above board. And the way that he ends the movie and this journey that he goes on, I thought was really really touching, and I really enjoyed this movie. And the final thing I'll say before we get to your thoughts is too, it's the one of the funniest movies he's done in a very long time. It felt like a more of an out and out comedy. I mean, maybe the most recent movie that was this funny that he did was 10 years ago with Budapest Hotel, which I thought was hilarious, mainly due to Ray Fiennes. But this movie is just incredibly funny, entertaining, engaging. But there was this heart to it and this relationship between father and daughter that I just really love. So I thought this is a great return to form to Wes Anderson, and I cannot wait to see this movie a second time. I've only seen it that one time. What about what is your take on Phoenician Scheme?
Yeah, I enjoyed it too. I agree it was funny and fun, and I have not laughed out loud in a Wes Anderson movie in a while since the Grand Budapest Hotel. It's obviously not at that level in terms
Yeah,
of
yeah.
the joy and just the fun of that movie, but this movie still is very funny. It's not a nesting doll story structure. It's pretty linear, which you
Mhm.
follow, although it is chapterized, which is sort of what he's been doing lately. But yeah, I found obviously the whole father-daughter relationship is at the center of it, and that is life affirming. It's pretty tender, and it's amazing to see how that relationship evolves as the time goes. But yeah, there are political messages. There's an intrigue to it too in this character, and there's almost like, well, this is sort of maybe going to an overarching summary of his career, but there's
Yeah.
always like a troubled dad like character in his movies, right?
Hmm.
Somebody who's obsessive about stuff, is very detail oriented, and is kind of a bad dad. At the same time, there's something appealing and very attractive about them. And this character is similar, right from the amazing opening scheme where he's just survived a plane crash
Yeah.
and, he's laying in this bathtub and, omelet or scrambled eggs and champagne and stuff are being served. And so there's an overhead shot, and you sort of are like, yeah, this is probably not a good dude who's used a lot of people for his own benefit. At the same time, you are kind of intrigued by him too. he's not a dum-dum. He's an erudite. He reads, he's always reading. He's kind of a daredevil as well. He survives
Yeah.
so many plane crashes. And so in some ways you admire this person that, he really is after whatever, even though what he's after might be very selfish and the means that by which he gets to them are, exploitative or what have you. So it's a pretty complex character. And then to your point, there's a lot of sort of political intrigue and such that unfolds as a result of that. So the movie has a lot on its mind, like most Wes Anderson movies. They're like packed and they're so dense, but it's amazing through all of this tapestry and the 50s landscape and everything. He's able to kind of make this father-daughter relationship as the prime narrative, even though there's so much else going on, and that's what is the winning theme of the movie in my mind. I will say though, and again, I have to watch it one more time. I will say that because it was not the nesting doll structure, I just had Budapest Hotel on my mind as I started
Hmm.
watching this movie, and that's just such a hard bar to cross because Grand Budapest is such a delightful, joyous movie. Part of what it's after and its look and its feel, but most importantly, because of Ray Fiennes. I mean, that
Right.
performance is for the ages, and I'm very curious to hear about, what you thought of Benicio and the rest of the cast. And I always think Benicio is a very interesting actor with a very interesting face. Like you just want to look at this person because he doesn't even have to say much. And often in his roles, he doesn't even say much, like Sicario or whatever. You just look at him and you know what exactly is going on. He's a very emotive actor. But I don't know, there's something also of distance, which is maybe part of the character, right? Because he's discovering himself in a relationship. As a result of that, I found myself at a distance as well from this character and hence the movie. Even though I laughed, even though I was engaged, at some point, of course, you lose track of the plot, but who cares? I
Right.
mean,
Right.
the stuff that's coming out of the shoe boxes and such, and the people that he's meeting, it's sort of intriguing, but you also kind of forget and get distracted by so much that's going on that, what percentage of money is being amassed for this Phoenician scheme? What is
Yeah.
even the Phoenician scheme? Who knows?
Yeah.
So there's some of that coupled with just sort of his portrayal, I think, just left me a little bit at a distance, and that's the only thing that I sort of felt was maybe lacking. That said, I had a great time watching it. Obviously, all the mise en scene, as always, as expected, is incredible in the movie, and the final 30 minutes are a real knockout of the movie, which I thought. And I want to get more thoughts from you, but I'll just quickly say from the cast, I mean, I know Mia Stapleton is Kate Winslet's daughter. I knew
Yeah.
that going in. I'd never seen her in anything. And the moment you see her not only talk, but just carry herself an emoji, you're instantly like, of course, she's Kate Winslet's daughter. Just the way she speaks. And
Yeah.
I think she's incredible in the movie. Like she holds her own amongst all these people. She is, as they say, like the beating heart of the movie. But I think she is. And but at the same time, like a great Wes Anderson character, very deadpan, who's like slowly opening up,
Yeah.
doesn't really have access to her emotions. She's also becoming a nun, so that's part of the job that you kind of sequester her emotions away. But she's sort of opening up bit by bit with Michael Cera's help and the beers that they're drinking. So, and that was really fun to see her, really kick it. And so, yeah, I enjoyed it. Is it in my top tier, Wes? No, but I still really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I thought she was really great, and the sort of the arc that both her and Benicio as the father kind of go through on this movie,
Yeah,
where they're like he is becoming. I mean, look, he's a very shrewd businessman. He's meant to kind of be a hard-nosed kind
right.
of guy who all he cares about is like getting that profit, getting that money, and then over time realizes there's something that is more important to him. I think he realized it in the beginning, and that's why he brought his daughter back in. But it was funny to see her like starting off as a nun who you kind of get the fact that she was abandoned by the dad is maybe why she's like rebelling by being a nun because she gradually she's like, oh, I don't drink, and then it's like she's gradually
Right.
drinking more alcohol. And I love by the end of the movie the very last thing she's doing is like she's drinking, she's smoking, she's gambling, like all the things that a nun wouldn't be doing. So it's like gradually drinking more alcohol. Then she gets her pipe out. Half of the movie is like, whoa, she has a pipe, like. okay, she's smoking. So I thought that was really cool. Like Lucina really becoming herself because she put on this, shield of rebellion by trying to become a nun because her dad basically was never there for her. And for him, starting off as this, ruthless businessman that all he cares about is money, and then eventually not only caring about his daughter gradually over the course of the film, but, doing something at the end of the movie where he wasn't a shrewd capitalist anymore, that all that he was doing was exploiting others to create profit for profit's sake. No, he's putting his own, the two things that he loved doing, it was good at, they said in the film, was cooking and washing dishes. And then he opens a restaurant at the end, so it's like
Right.
he's actually his
It's pretty
own.
amazing.
Yeah, his own labor is finally being his source of his profit instead of exploiting other people's labor through all these different schemes and things. So I love how he realized like he wasn't happy and alone as this rich, this typical story of a rich guy who, money isn't everything and he finds family. And yeah, this is Wes's version of that, which I thought was great. And I actually liked Benicio in this role. I mean, it's an actor I've always loved for a very, very long time. And I think he is good at playing someone who you believe is like resilient and ruthless, but also has that heart. So by the end, when you see him
Mhm.
washing the dishes, you also believe he can do that, as well as like in the beginning, where he's like, I don't care, like, we're not paying the slaves. Okay, well, maybe the slaves will be paid. That was, I love that. He's like, oh, fine, I'll pay the slaves. But that arc, I think he was very well cast in this. I mean, he hasn't been. Oh, I guess he's been in some minor roles in West before, but not the lead. No West movie, but
Not the
not the
lead. Yeah.
lead. I think he really fits really well into this world. So to me, it really came down to that father-daughter relationship and simplifying the movie, and there was a lot around it. Just to that was a return to the kind of movies that I love that he does, which are really just like one or two handers of just about one relationship instead of all these giant ensembles, which again, I felt French Dispatch and Asteroid City just had, for me at least, like too much going on, and there was nowhere I could kind of ground on the characters. It just became more about the amazing look of those films. So, and for me, Benicio worked is kind of what I'm
Mm.
what I'm trying to get to. Even though
Yeah.
I get what you mean about if him as an actor feels a little cold. Yeah, this role is cold through most of it until
And that's the part
he's
of
a
it.
he's a
Yeah.
nice business restaurateur who does his own dishes, which I thought was cool.
Yeah, the ending is really great, and I guess the other thing we should mention is that I mean Wes Anderson has had some pretty gory, you know, violent moments in his career, but off late he's not done that, and this movie kind of explores with that again. Like
Yeah.
there's literally a person whose top half gets blown away in a plane, which is funny, but also kind of jarring, comes out of nowhere and not what you expect, in a movie like this. So. I kind of found that pretty intriguing, that he's playing with that form, playing with the audience's expectation, but also saying something about this world and this character, right? That
Yeah.
for these people who are rich and sort of can make anything happen, sort of the cost of life is pretty low. You sort of keep going. And frankly, not just for other people, even for himself. Like he's
Right.
survived 8 plane crashes. Like he just keeps going. Like he or six or eight, whatever. So,
Right. Yeah.
he's nobody's spared. As long as the mission, whatever that is at play, that's the obsession, right? Once again, like all his leading characters always have some sort of obsession behind them, and so is this guy. So I thought that was done in a pretty unique, whimsical, but kind of jarring way, which only Wes can pull off.
Yeah, I love the violence in this. I mean, it sounds weird to
Yeah.
say that, but it was like Wes Anderson violence, but turned up a little bit, like border on some like Kill Bill level, hilarious like gore that I found funny. I thought it was
Yeah,
interesting to
it was
see that. I
really
was like,
funny.
whoa, like in a Wes Anderson movie, we're seeing a guy get like blown apart and like multiple plane crashes and dead bodies and body parts and stuff. I'm like, actually, this kind of works within this world. Another actor I just want to call out too is Michael Cera, who I thought was brilliant in this film, like
Yeah.
incredibly funny. His character goes in a direction that was at least a huge surprise to me. And immediately was like, oh, this is even better than where he comes in as a certain version of his character and then turns into another version. I'm like, oh my God, like this is like perfect. So I thought he added a great bit of humor and again, surprising he's never worked with Wes before because his sort of deadpan, odd
Totally.
humor fits in so well with the Wes Anderson, mode and tone and vibe. So I really definitely want to call him out as being great, and hopefully he comes back in other Wes movies. But yeah, it was very it was great moments of comedy from Michael Cera in this.
So great. One other person I'd call out to is Cumberbatch, who, I'm okay on him. Yeah, there are parts that he's been good at, but lately I've sort of been like, okay, fine, whatever. But I thought he was really great. Like his makeup and his beard and his sort of fierceness and aggressiveness was A, great for the character, but also great for the movie. Because by then we've sort of been on the road. I might have dozed off in the Scarlett Johansson section. I don't remember what happened in that section, even though she looks great. But when he came out, I was like woken up in my seat. I was like, okay, something is happening. And the whole movie starts to coalesce together. It underlines the scheme, it underlines the relationship because it's revealed, spoiler alert, that he might be Mia Stapleton's character's,
Father.
mom's killer or
Right.
even
Or mom's killer too.
father.
Yeah, right,
So
right.
there's like a lot of that, and that sort of climax is amazing and kind of moving after all that hullabaloo. That even though she's not his daughter, Benicio's, they still end up, going on, and he ends up adopting her, which is really moving and sweet, which sort of says even more about his arc and journey, right? That this is not just somebody who he had to be with because she's his daughter. He made a choice to
Correct.
change his life and go with this person who he wanted to maybe make her his sole heir, but I don't know if that was fully thought through until they went on this journey. I mean, as I'm thinking about the movie, it's kind of becoming clearer to me as to why he does that at the end, because they've been on this journey. And
Right.
like you said, this is a Wes Anderson movie, so there's no big monologue to articulate that because these people are unable to do that. It's just this act of doing this says it all.
Exactly.
That you, even though you're not of my blood, we're together and we're going to,
Right.
change our lives.
Yeah, yeah, it's through action you see
Yeah.
what they're trying to say because they can't even say it at the end. And I think that was what is so sweet and interesting about this character's journey. You're right. I don't think he knew when he started where it was going to go. Maybe it was she was part of the scheme in
I
some
think
way in the
so.
beginning. And as he got to know her and as their relationship formed and as he, in his own way opened up to her in the same way she started opening up to him in his own way, in her own way too, they, yeah, it became a real genuine thing where at the end they're actual business partners, but in a real business, not in a fake scheme because they're both working at this restaurant. And it's interesting, like the also as through his arc, the different like religious overtones in this
Right.
too, which I also want to call out another bit of I literally laughed out loud in the theater with Bill Murray playing
It's
God
God.
was incredible. Like that was an incredible piece of I will say it is stunt casting, but
Yeah.
amazing. And like that was
Very
great.
good.
But it was interesting seeing that. You could sort of see his character, Benicio del Toro's character, gradually kind of coming to grips and in a way like meeting God and realizing what he was really after in his life and wasn't really what he wanted. And, the typical thing about money doesn't buy happiness. But I liked how those scenes were kind of like woven into the movie to break it up a little bit. And they definitely did stand out too. I think it was different aspect ratio. Obviously, they were in black and white. But I think, again, that's Wes playing with the film form, which I love how he does that. But again, always for symbolic reasons, not just for fun. And so I think that was cool to see those. I like those scenes a lot too. Those little
Yeah.
moments of character development.
I totally agree. And I think it adds a lot more depth to the movie now that I'm thinking about it. And I can't wait to watch this movie again, which is
Yeah.
that this guy is in deep crisis, actually.
Hmm.
Crisis of faith. He's barely hanging on to his life.
Right.
And if you look at it from an empathetic standpoint, he doesn't know how else to exist. This is how he's
Yeah. He's
done things,
cheated and schemed his entire life.
Yeah,
That's it. That's all he
and
knows what to do.
the culture has even applauded that, right? And the people he meets, like Tom Hanks and Bryan Cranston, Jeffrey Wright, like all these people are people who've sort of done similar things, and they are
Yeah.
people, of money and wealth and power, and so that's how he knows how to be. And this is sort of a moment of crisis, and yet, because it's a Wes Anderson movie, you don't really see that unfold in like a typical way, but it's very deep seated and almost hidden,
Yes.
which is sort of, I think, the theme of the last three movies, which are, I think, a lot more grown up and even more sophisticated in the emotion, where the emotion has become even more hidden, I think, but behind the artifice. But I think it's on purpose because he's grown up as an artist, right? Like to me, The French Dispatch is very much about him commenting about his own art and what that means. Like the Bill Murray character, who's the head journalist of the French
Publisher or
Dispatch.
whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, he ends up committing suicide because he's unsure of what his art means and can the paper or the magazine even continue if he's not there. While Astra City is about grief, where the whole piece is through this theater director Edward Norton's character's point of view, right?
Right.
And in this scenario, once again, I think he dies, but the play lives on. Right? So this is almost him. This is a very existential time for Wes, I think, where
It seems
he's,
like it.
exploring what is it to be an artist? What is it to deal with grief and loss and death? Because really, that's what Astro City is about. Like the alien is a manifestation of death.
Right.
And now
Right.
this one is about crisis of faith and crisis of relationship with family, right? So these are really deep themes. So I love that, somebody in his later career is exploring these things in their unique style and going even deeper in their artifice as opposed to, I hate to say it, but a Kenneth Branagh, Belfast movie about growing up in the
Hmm.
Troubles, though handsomely made, but that's such an overt, reflection of one's life versus these are much more interesting, complicated reflections of his own life. So it's
No.
great.
Yeah, exactly. I think at the point where, Wes deals as his career is going on with more complicated emotions, like you said, and then as the emotions get more complicated, the artifice almost gets more and more. Like
Yeah,
the his like style and his production design and art direction and cinematography, he leans more into that as he covers things that are maybe even harder for him to express. And I think that is an interesting dichotomy and maybe why, some people again just criticize these movies for being empty because all
right.
that they see is more and more of these artifice getting built. I mean, Grand Budapest Hotel, which we'll talk about later on this episode, has so much going on the surface that it's very easy to miss what it actually is about. And I
Right.
think some people kind of dismiss Wes as only again like style with no substance, but I think the substance is getting deeper and deeper, and these themes are more existential and more heady and harder to kind of nail down. So to deal with that, he's actually becoming more like distant by putting layers of this art direction on top of that because I don't think he can address these things directly as it's very hard for anyone to, frankly, because there are no
Yeah.
answers to these questions. And, the crisis of faith, I think that Benicio del Toro's character goes in this movie, there isn't like a clear answer to this other than just like, oh, he found something. He can't really feel what that is. He can't express it to his daughter. It's just the only action they can take is just start a restaurant together. And now they're just like business partners and she's a gambler now. And he's washing dishes. And but that he's so you can tell in the end of that movie he's actually happier and more of
Yeah.
himself. And they feel and so is she. Like she felt restricted, I felt like in
Yeah.
when she was a nun. She didn't really want to be a nun. She was just doing this to say, screw you, dad. I'm gonna go off and join like a nunnery or something.
Right.
So it feels nice to see that, even though they're not saying it, but the
Yeah.
audience can see that, and that's what makes, in a way, is more powerful.
Totally agree. I mean, that's the thing. Like, he's not the kind of director who's going to feed it all to you.
Right.
You have to discover it for yourself. But if you want to enjoy the visuals, you can. It's just that the visuals have always been good and they've been the same in a way. And that's why people are getting a little tired, which I'm sad for,
Yeah.
So, but I think people will rewatch these movies, rediscover them, and their reputation will change. And so it's going to be okay, I
Oh,
think.
I think so too. I mean, he's
Yeah,
cemented himself at this point in,
exactly.
film history as one of the signature
One of the
auteurs, at
greats.
least of this age. I mean, you can
Yep.
see it by the knockoff stuff, when there's
Yeah.
AI's faking film. It's like Wes Anderson version of this. Some people see that as a knock. I see it as, oh, that's a sign of a true artist. If you can knock someone off in that style of whoever, this person is, that means they changed the game in some way that was so
Mm-hmm.
unique. No one had done it before. You would never mistake, a Wes Anderson. You could very easily tell, oh, this is meant to be a Wes Anderson parody, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's a good thing for him
Yeah.
in terms of what he's done, and
It's
not like something
flattering,
like
I
a
think. Even
knock.
though
You know,
I don't know how he feels about that. I
sure,
mean,
yeah.
I can't imagine that he appreciates that,
He
but
probably doesn't, but
no.
I think it's a sign of his power and not a
Yeah.
sign of his emptiness or like that he's really nothing because you could just easily copy him.
Yeah.
I think that is a good thing to me as a Wes Anderson fan. I'm glad that there is this Wes Anderson parody stuff. So
I agree. All right. So with that, should we move to our next segment of
yeah,
the movies that we're going to cover of his. So, as usual, we cover first loves, masterpieces, and wild cards between the two of us. The first love is basically when we were totally enamored by this filmmaker or this artist and, fell in love with their work. The masterpiece is what we think is sort of their masterwork. And the wild card is something that they took a chance and tried something different. It might have succeeded or not, either way. So, with that, what is your first love of Wes Anderson?
So my first love is obvious, probably to longtime listeners, because we've talked about it before, is Rushmore. This is his film from 1998. IMDb plot summary: a teenager at Rushmore Academy falls for a much older teacher and befriends a middle-aged industrialist. Later, he finds out that his love interest and his friend are having an affair, which prompts him to begin a vendetta. Directed by Wes Anderson, co-written by Wes Anderson, along with Owen Wilson, starring Jason Schwartzman, Bill Murray, and Olivia Williams. So, like I said, we've talked about this movie before, but for me, it was one of those times where I'm sitting in a theater, and I saw this as a kid in the theater, and instantly was like, I love this film. I love this filmmaker. This speaks to me that it is showing me film language that at that time I hadn't seen before, felt really fresh and new, and immediately like I was in, like instantly after seeing this film. And a lot of it was my identification with the Max Fisher character. I was also a kid who went to an all boys private school, wearing the blazers, similar, like trying to, involved in a lot of different activities, starting my own club, starting, foosball club and different Chinese club and things at my school. So that piece of it, I was definitely felt like connected to that character. And then the fact that, like I said, it's very visually interesting. There's a lot of really cool framing in this movie, blocking. He's very the symmetry is something that I'm drawn to, and it's not as overt as some of his later films. It's sort of like the beginning of that because it is only his second full length feature film, but that immediately stood out to me and felt really unique and cool. The different chapters of the seasons and the curtain opening up and the soundtrack and all these typical things that on a surface level drew me in. And then it wasn't until I watched this movie a lot, and as I kind of got older and was able to see really like the things that this movie were about, really underneath the surface. So I will admit, when I saw this, it was definitely more being just bought in and distracted, or drawn to, I should say, not distracted, by the mise en scène, and missing what this movie really is about, which is people dealing with loss and grief, and Max losing his mom, and Olivia Williams' character, which is the teacher, losing her husband. Bill Murray being in an empty relationship where he's not able to relate to his wife and feeling like he doesn't like his kids, probably. Like, all these things are really what the movie's about, and how lost people find each other so they can become better people, and how Max saves Bill Murray's character, and then eventually Olivia Williams as well. These are all things that I will admit, when I saw this as a kid, did not see. And I loved the other things. And the more I'd watch the movie, the older I got, I was able to see those things that Wes wasn't able to express so overtly, and that's why it's even grown even more in my mind as a film that just speaks to me a lot personally, and just I think is a very unique work for Wes. So that is my bit on Rushmore. And what is again? I know we've talked about this movie before, but any new Rushmore insights this time that we're delving more to the West side of things? So we covered them on the Bill, this probably this on the Bill Murray episode, as well as my episode, or my pick on the school experiences episode. So I'll post both those links below. But anything new to add when focusing more on West with Rushmore?
Yeah, it looks like you got West in the classic way.
I did
I
immediately.
think
I
you
was
did.
West. Yes.
No, I mean, this is a easily could have been a masterpiece of mine. Like, this is a signature work. You see all the beginnings of these characters who are smart, articulate, they're passionate, they're obsessive, they're after something, but they're also inarticulate about their emotions and who they are. And what makes this even more fun, I think, quote unquote, is that it's set up, right? Like, you're all this is happening in a school environment where this is so true anyway, right? Like, people don't know who they are.
Right.
There are all these plays and theatrical things that are being put together, clubs. There's just so many activities, which sort of feels like the perfect kind of space for a Wes Anderson motif to live, because all of his movies are sort of these, miniature dollhouse sets and stages anyway. So that
Yes.
literally that are happening in the movie. And then to your point, it's not one person's journey, it's all these people finding each other together in very unexpected ways. So it's sort of a perfectly pitched movie, I think, which only he can make. I was thinking about this time to answer your question, like, if this movie was made by somebody else, and of course it has been, right? Like this is not a new idea of coming of
Right.
age of somebody
Right.
who's precocious and kind of annoying, but also kind of endearing and troubled and, getting into trouble and what have you. But and then finds himself or saves other people in spite of himself. This has been done before, but the tone of that movie done by somebody else would be totally different. And I think the tone of this movie is, to your point, it's sort of it's attractive, it's enduring, like it makes you want to get up and participate and do stuff. That's the thing I kept thinking of this time, is that there's something so charming about Max Pitcher, even though I want to slap him after, and I want to slap the other people around him, say, Olivia Williams, get away from him, do not encourage this kid. But you still want to participate and be a part of his shenanigans, and that's such a true thing, right? Because in our real lives, people who are insecure or lonely or whatever, they're actually quite attractive or can be. You want to be with them. So there's something very true that this movie captures. And then the final thing I would say is that the way the movie ends is just
Mm.
one of the best endings of how everything kind of works out with all these people. I love the Margaret Yang relationship that kind of develops in this movie, and how they show that. Like he's very dismissive of her, treats her very poorly. Another moment if I want to slap him, I'm like, don't do that. She's great. And then he finally sees her that, yeah, she's got his back and she's sort of one of him. So yeah, it's a gift that just keeps giving these amazing characters, the amazing space, and then great kid performances. That's another thing which Wes is so good at. And I guess the last thing I'll say is a theme that repeats several times in his movies is where the kids are almost acting like grown-ups and the grown-ups are acting like kids, just the
Yeah.
way they speak, the way they articulate, and then they sort of meet somewhere in the middle. So I think I don't know if this is the start of that, but yeah, it just is more overt in that sense. And we see this play along, throughout his entire career.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think this really cements like who he was going to become, like starting that process. And I also really love the ending of this film. Like not only even the final scene where it's like that slow motion, which he did a lot in the beginning of his career, right? The
Oh
slow
yeah.
motion, and then that awesome Faces song comes up, and every character sort of enters the frame in this sort of perfect way, and then the curtain closes. But I really also love that that like I was saying, where there isn't this giant speech where people say, "Oh, this is what I learned and this is what I love," but just a simple thing in the end of the film where Max dedicates the play that he's about to do to his mother, who is someone he never admitted
Hmm.
publicly existed, and that she was, passed away, and what his feelings were for her. But at the same time, also Olivia Williams' husband, where throughout the movie he's doing these big gestures to her, which are like, oh, what would he maybe want or she want? Build this aquarium, do these big acts for. But instead, it becomes this very personal thing. I wrote this play, and these are two people that I care about that are no longer here because this play deals with loss in some way. And just that simple, I dedicate this to these, my mother, and then, I can't remember the Appleby of his first name, but the husband of Olivia Williams. That's all
Yeah.
you need to say, and that says everything that needs to be said about where this character is, the end of his journey, what he's learned. There doesn't need to be anything else other than that, and that is what I love about these movies is they can be like so subtle. And again, I have to admit,
Hmm.
as a kid, I totally missed that. I didn't notice that at all when I was seeing this in high school when I first saw the film. But now it's like that simple dedication just hits me every time. It's like, wow, like this is yeah, what has Max learned? Who is he now? And all the growth that he's gone on is just really yeah, really great. I think
Totally.
that is really represents what Wes does well.
Totally. I mean, the other scene also in that same vein is him accepting his father, meaning that not lying about him, that he's
Yes.
not, a scientist or a doctor or whatever he
Brain
says. He's
surgeon.
brain surgeon, like he's just, he's great, and they definitely have a close relationship, but he's always posturing, right? Pretending
Hmm.
to be somebody else, and because there's so much loss in him and insecurity and unable to kind of feel through all of that. There's all this artifice that he's built in his life, quite literally, but also emotionally. So I love that scene when he introduces at the play cocktail hour, whatever, his dad, and that always gets me because,
Yeah.
and the dad is so sweet. He knows what he's up to,
Right.
and he sort of lets him be because he's like, what am I going to say? And or he maybe thinks that Max will find his way. I mean, I think there's this sort of quiet sense of confidence in your kid that he'll find his way as long as I just keep loving him and keep being there for him, things will be okay. But
Yeah.
again, to your point, none of this is said out loud. There are no emotional speeches, just those little gestures.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's
Yeah,
great.
yeah, that moment too with him is so great at the end as well, and how Bill Murray's character sort of like coming into his own and getting very
Hmm.
depressed, but then coming back and being there with the Olivia Williams' character and them kind of reconcile at the end. So the way they land each of these characters, I think is so brilliant because it is just these three characters really that you're following
Yeah.
throughout the film, which I love when he doesn't get so big with the ensemble and just really focuses on like one or two characters. Yeah, this movie will always be one of my favorite movies. And then in fact as well, just to plug a YouTube video that is on our channel
Yeah.
for people listening on the podcast. You go to our YouTube and you can see us go into the Criterion Closet where I get the Rushmore Blu-ray, talk about that, and get some good anecdotes there. So just a plug for if you haven't yet gone to our YouTube, you can see us go into the closet and talk a little more about Rushmore. So yeah, it was a very fun experience. Okay, so what is your first love of Wes Anderson, Karan?
All right, so my first love is actually his first feature-length movie, The Bottle Rocket from 1996, directed, of course, by Wes Anderson, written by him and Owen Wilson, starring Owen Wilson, Luke Wilson, Ned Dowd, a bunch of other folks, uh, James Caan. How
Yeah.
can I miss that? Quick log line. Three friends plan to pull off a simple robbery and go on the run. We've covered this movie before too, I think in our movies about love, I
Yeah,
think, if
meet
I'm not
cute,
mis
I think.
or
The
Meet
right, the
Cute.
meet cute
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
moments. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a good Meet Cute movie,
Yeah.
exactly, for sure. I mean, I didn't watch this movie when it came out. I watched it much later. I had no idea who Wes Anderson was. I knew the Wilson brothers, so I think I checked it out for them and was just completely blown away by just the odd tone and relationships of this movie. And then of course started to seek out a lot of Wes's world. So this will always be my first love of him. And it's funny watching it. I've seen it many times, but watching
Yeah.
it this time, I was like, oh, all the things are kind of there. This is I can't believe this is the first feature-length movie he did. I know there was a
Yeah.
short of the same
Hmm.
name and same characters, etc., which I've not seen, but like from the blocking to the symmetry to the performances to how awkward they are, but also endearing, obsessive. They're on their journey to kind of find themselves. It's all there, and it sort of feels like one of those movies where I can't imagine. I mean, I don't know if you saw it when it came out, but I could feel watching it this time that this must have been like a lightning bolt. That what is this movie? What is this voice? It's a story that's been done before, but we've never felt this way watching a movie. So I don't know. I was all smiles watching this movie. I know we talked a lot about his relationship with Owen Wilson. This is kind of
Yeah.
the beginning of that. Obviously, them collaborating is such a perfectly pitched performance from Owen Wilson. Like I can't imagine anybody else doing that. And just the way every bit of dialogue comes out from his mouth, like it's tailor made the
Oh
way it's
yeah.
written. And yet, I will say to give this movie credit, and I guess in the early chapter of West, that it feels very effortless.
Hmm.
As time has gone by, things have become more and more controlled, more and more artifice, full of artifice. But this doesn't have much of that. It's pretty straightforward in many ways. Yet these people are unable to communicate. Obviously, that's still true.
Hmm.
So I don't know. It's a great movie. It kind of stands out in the West canon, but if you think about it, it's all there. So I'm so happy to always watch this movie. And then last shot is the meet cute, the whole relationship between Luke Wilson and the woman who saw the cleaner at the hotel. It's so sweet, so cute, even though I don't know if she's up to the acting task of what is required from this movie. I mean, watching it this time, I definitely felt that if there was somebody else in that role, like what would this movie feel like? But it's adequate still. But their relationship, at least from his point of view, and how he starts to change and he starts to get a grip of his life and start to kind of look back at what he was with Owen, that's the core of the movie. This is a relationship movie between these two guys. So I love that. And then you have Jimmy Khan, the
Yeah.
old bad, obsessive person. There's always one of those guys, right? So, and again, I don't know how he even got him to be in his first movie,
Yeah.
but incredible. I mean, that's the other thing. He has his knack of getting incredible actors even when he was so young, in his career. So, yeah, what are your thoughts on Bottle Rocket? Anything
Yeah.
new that jumped at you?
Yeah, this is also one of my favorite movies and one of my favorite Wes movies. I think you're right in the sense of this feels like his most loose film. It was
Yeah.
interesting. I'd seen many times, or many times, a couple times before the original short that this was based
Oh,
on, and I rewatched it after watching the film on this rewatch, and it was very interesting to look at. It's black and white, and it feels
uh-huh.
very much like a more like Godard kind of French New Wave, which I know
Oh,
Wes is very influenced by that, but it felt all like breathless, like super loose, kind of not very conventional or dialed in terms of the
improvisatory
structure
sort
and
of.
controlled. Yeah, and this one also feels a little bit like that too. It's like he hasn't gotten to that more very specific, like directed, planned, mise-en-scène, blocking, shot, composition. That Rushmore, you can definitely see that, and it gets more and more dialed up as his career goes on. There's like a fun looseness to this that I still really like that gets translated in the full-length feature of this. And yeah, this really is down to again, two characters that are drifters trying to find purpose in their lives. They can't really express what's missing. One of them finds it in love with Luke Wilson and Inez, and then Dignan, Owen Wilson's character, basically finds it by deciding to be a criminal in a fun way. He's like, oh, I don't really have anything I'm good at or I want to do, and it's sort of like you're in your early 20s or mid 20s, and you kind of like, what is the point of my life? And both of them have that sense. And then yeah, they just choose different paths, even though there is that friendship that remains there the whole time, which is so yeah, cute, I guess I'll say, because they're brothers in real life and they don't play brothers in
Yeah.
the film. They play best friends, but there is this sort of brotherly love that they immediately
Mm-hmm.
share that is really great. And I love, I mean, I think this is honestly Owen Wilson's signature performance as Dignan. He's
Yeah.
so good on this. Immediately you can see why he becomes, a star and has a pretty big career for at least about 10 years, Hollywood on the acting side. And it feels just like he is Dignan. Like his little
Yeah.
improvs, his obsessions, he's like, this is my 40-year plan, and here's like what step I'm gonna be at, and here's your copy of like your plan, and all of that just is so yeah, so fun and funny and sweet too as well, which I do find a lot in this. Not only Owen Wilson's performance in West movies, but I do think these first three that they wrote together, Bottle Rocket, Rushmore, and Tenenbaums, have a different sense to them, a more sense of sincerity and heart that I do feel gets lost later on as he just stops working with Owen Wilson. Eventually, even as an actor, over the years, he doesn't pop up as much as he did, which is honestly something else I used to really like about Wes Anderson in the beginning of his career too. The sense of the same actors, but a small set of players who weren't famous. It was okay. Owen Wilson, who had heard of him? Luke Wilson, no one. Jason Schwartzman had been no one at that time. I love, Kumar in this movie, who shows up in several of the films. Like, just guy, he's a good actor, no, but we love seeing Kumar, and every time he shows up in the next four of these films, and that over time that kind of got lost. He's like, oh, now I work with Tom Hanks. I work with, Bruce Willis and Edward Norton, and he has a set of players now, but they're all like A-listers. I,
Right.
I like the quaintness of this movie where, it's just his own guys. And I don't know, there's something that I always love about these early films, especially this one, which is so sweet. I love Bottle Rocket so much.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. Yeah. But I guess it makes sense, right? Like he's early in his career. Like I've heard Best talk about that this movie to him is sort of how these guys were. They
Yeah.
were friends in real life. And you forget, or I forget, I suppose, that he's from Texas.
Yeah.
He's not
Yeah.
this now he lives in France, which makes more sense to me, actually.
Yeah.
But you can't imagine that this person is from there. And this movie sort of has that feel, actually, of people who are from a place, but maybe they have other dreams that they want to explore, but
Mhm.
don't know how. And there's like, yeah, there's something loose about that. There's something fun about that. But then I feel like it's almost like Wes finds where he wants to be, right, in his own life, and then that starts to percolate in the movies as well. Like they become a lot more controlled, they become a lot more elevated, a lot more literary, New Yorker like, all of that. It's sort of which is kind of cool in a way, I guess. Even though I agree with you, I miss some of that early kind of piece, but then we would always get the same, So
I
there's
understand.
also
Yeah.
that,
Right.
and
Right.
he's being very true to himself as an artist, I think, because I
Mhm.
think where he's at the success he's had, the life he's led, for him to go back and make something like that would feel kind of too concocted, I suppose. I don't even
Or
know if he could do
a
it.
step backwards.
It'll
No,
be a step backward.
yeah, I agree. He
Totally.
evolved past this period for sure. I mean, a lot of things in these first three films of the use of pop rock soundtracks and slow
Right.
motion, and again, these his sort of friends that he had before he became famous.
Right.
That yes, he outgrew that, but there is something I
There's
just sort
no
of
nostalgia to it for
yes, there's like
sure.
a nostalgia to that and this feeling of yeah, like attachment that I can feel to that world and this set of players that he had and him at this time where he wasn't this big, brand for lack of a better word of everyone
Yeah.
knowing who Wes Anderson was. I mean, these movies were not I did not see Bottle Rocket in the theater, I should say too. I saw that after Rushmore on I think VHS even because there wasn't a DVD for a while. It was hard to track down. So yeah, it felt like a little bit of like, oh, I'm into this guy, and now he's someone who is mainstream and known, and that's great. And he'll never go back to this, but there's still this innocence that this movie especially captures that I always
Yeah.
find really nice to kind of go back to and fun and breezy and comforting, and it's such a great film, and it really to me goes back to the two brothers.
Yeah.
Luke and Owen Wilson are just so nice in this movie,
Yeah.
so
So
fun.
good. All right. What is your masterpiece of Wes?
Okay, so my of Wes is another movie we've covered before. We're seeing a lot of repetition here because both of us love Wes, and it brought him in a lot of different ways. So it is Royal Tenenbaums from 2001. And this movie is the eccentric members of a dysfunctional family reluctantly gather under the same roof for various reasons. Very vague.
Very
Directed by
vague.
Wes Anderson, written by Wes, along with Owen Wilson. A big cast in this one. There's a couple folks: Gene Hackman, Gwyneth Paltrow, Angelica Houston, Ben Stiller, Bill Murray, Luke Wilson, Owen Wilson. Again, a bunch of folks in this film. So, for me, why this movie really is my masterpiece for Wes is I think this is the first time he is fully firing on all cylinders with the type of film that he will be making moving forward. So we have this very, controlled camera, incredible mise en scène, symmetry, shots, composition, pop rock soundtracks, big cast of famous actors. But at the same time, the themes are the same, right? A family that is in crisis, people not able to express emotion, there's past trauma that they can't deal with, and eventually there's catharsis by the end. I think this is yes, it is sort of like, in a way, you could say, like the formula that he then uses moving forward. But the first time he used it to me is I think really just the best of the best version of it. And on this time I was rewatching it too, it really struck me how this is maybe the last time where the world that the characters inhabit in a Wes Anderson movie feels like the real world in some
Mm.
way. And they're odd or different and very Wes. And there's obviously a lot of production design in their house and the way that they dress, but they exist in real New York City, much like Max Fisher did in this real town in Texas, and Owen Wilson and Luke Wilson in Bottle Rocket. And moving forward, not only the characters, but the world starts to feel very designed. And what I love in this movie is it's not. It's like these characters feel more real than interacting in our real world, and you can see them out there and just dealing with trauma in these very unique ways. We'll get more into the themes in a bit with this, but yeah, this movie every time I see it, it actually rises more and more in my general film ranking. Like I think this movie just is a masterpiece of film
Yeah.
that really is maybe the best movie about divorce also ever made. So we'll get more into this, but I want to hear your thoughts on Tenenbaums. Again, I know we talked about it before, but anything
Yeah.
new
Yeah.
in framing of Wes?
Yeah. No, it's sort of crazy that one director has made like so many masterpieces. Like the three movies we've talked about, all of them could be
Oh
in
yeah,
his masterpiece and
yeah.
frankly in the general masterpiece category. But yeah, this one is special. It's like a whole other level. And like you said, like he I think comes into his own entirely and is working on a much bigger canvas, but also the element of control is also heightened up in this
hmm
movie.
hmm
I agree, it feels more real as a place. At the same time, just the way the music and the blocking and the light and the color palette of it is very much to evoke a New York that you think of, you
Right,
know?
right.
It's not real New York. It's the New York that Wes wanted to live in, I guess, you
Hmm.
know? That's how I always take it. So there's still an artifice, but yeah, it still feels more real because they're actually out and about. Like there are not that many exterior shots
Right,
in most
right.
West movies anymore. And this one, you are outside, and that feels different. Yet the characters, like you said, they're similar. They are deadpan. What things are funny, what things are sad or morose or morbid, they're all kind of mixed in. I mean, there's so many great lines that, yeah, I mean, I committed suicide. How was it? Was it bad? Yeah, I almost killed myself. Like
Yeah.
these sort of lines are like so morbid and crazy, but they yet evoke a laugh, which, again, on the surface of it, you could enjoy that, but there's something true in all of this, right? That in the hardest times is when people laugh too,
Yeah.
when your world is collapsing, your family is collapsing, there's always a moment of sort of awkward joy that comes out. So I think this movie is so true about divorce, it's so true about genius and what it is to, be born with it or grow up with it and then lose it. And what that means, like all these children are kind of geniuses that they were put on a pedestal because they had an ability, but then nothing kind of panned out. And that's partly because of the collapse of the marriage of their parents. It's partly because of the dad issues that they've had because they've dealt with this, incredibly alluring but incredibly absent, manipulative, kind of a scoundrel of a dad.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But they've also made their own choices, right? At some point, you also have to take your own piece, and it's very important. I mean, he shows all of that. Like that's the thing. Like Wes's movies are never one-sided. Like if you think
Right.
about it, all of these people have a role to play to articulate why things are the way they are, you know? So, and it's just so deep. That said, you can just enjoy the movie for its jokes, its production design, like always as well. I will say this time around, the thing that really jumped out at me was the relationship between Angelica Houston and Danny Glover.
Mm.
That is such a sweet and tender relationship that almost feels like it's from a different movie, but it fits in perfectly because the movie needs that because everybody else is so off the rockers. These people are really damaged and troubled, and there is, even though this is also an awkward relationship because he's an accountant, he's sort of, boxy and kind of awkward in his own way, but their relationship is just so sweet that you can see almost like this is what life can be
Right.
when you find somebody who's sweet and wants to care for you and be there for you. Meanwhile, everything else is sort of toxic in its own way. So that really struck me. Angelica Houston is so great. Danny Glover is so great. This is sort of a perfect movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that relationship between them is the only healthy relationship in the entire film.
Exactly.
And I think that this movie is a lot about that, and that the royal character played by Gene Hackman, who is just a horrible dad, emotionally abusive to the kids and then even to his wife, and that damaged them, and then you see them as adults still carrying that with them. But the Danny Glover character and how he's relating with Angelica Houston, he is not toxic. And
Yeah.
there is a line even that Gene Hackman says, like, "Oh, I know why you guys work together because you're everything I'm not.
Well,
Right? You are a good person, and I was a horrible husband and then and father as well." And that redemption in this film, I think, is so interesting too, where much like in Phoenician Scheme, actually, right? A father has been bad and then trying to connect with his children, but in the Phoenician Scheme, it feels more like the dad has been absent. Whereas in this movie, yes, he's been absent, but he's also been incredibly abusive to these kids and comes right back into their life. And like, you can't just come back and expect like we can just welcome you with open arms. This is not going to work. And you have to, and he tries that. He like, takes Ben Stiller's kids out and these things that were like acts that you can tell he wants to better himself. And he's trying to say, oh, look, I'm a better person. Look. Yeah, but if you're not actually demonstrating that you're willing to admit you were wrong and come to these people with your heart open to your kids and actually be the real dad that you want, until you prove that, you don't earn anything. And I do like how he's not really taken in by the family until the very end of the movie when he starts actually becoming a dad and giving advice to, Luke Wilson's character, like, oh, I'm in love with my, adoptive sister. What do I do? And, that's like dad advice. And he's going to him and he's giving him sort of real kind of like fatherly advice. And then, I love that scene with Ben Stiller too, when he does say, yeah, I've had a hard year and is actually
Right.
opening up to his dad for the first time. And he's able to comfort him about the loss of his wife. So just the fact this movie shows you can't just come back into someone's life and expect to be, everything is forgiven, water under the bridge. It's like, no, you have to earn that. And he earns that in the end of the movie. And the family does actually all come together in the end and be able to express the one thing that they can't do. If it's simple as like, oh, I smoke, but that what Margot tells, Angelica Houston or, Gwyneth
Hmm.
Paltrow's character, admitting something like that, or admitting the love between the adopted brother and sister, and then that working out in the end. Like all these things like that have been held up that they're not able to express in their lives and what that does. I just love how this very subtle too. They don't really again have this big
No.
speech at the end at all. There's these little moments you're like, oh, now he has been redeemed in a way, not forgiven, but redeemed. And he is now their father, and they do all show up at the funeral. And I feel like if he died in the beginning of the movie, no one would have come. And justifiably so,
Exactly.
no one would have come, except maybe Kumar would have showed up, perhaps. But
Kumar would have
yeah,
definitely shown up. I
love him
love
in this movie.
their
Yeah,
loyalty between the two of them
so
is
great.
so amazing, funny, but also kind of sweet.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. I agree with everything you said. At the same time, it's about the character, but also in Gene Hackman's amazing, probably last incredible
Oh yeah.
Mount Rushmore performance, which
Hmm.
is that not only is this guy alluring and draws you in, but when he's out hanging out with the kids who are now totally under depression
Right.
of a father who's kind of lost it, and he's finally having these kids have fun, be out. And there's something sweet about that too, I think. Yes, he's manipulative, but I think this is how people are. He's manipulative, but at the same time, I think he kind of enjoys it too,
Of
being with
course.
his grandkids, in a real way. And that is part of the redemption, but it's also I can see why people would be upset about that and the family that, oh, you can't just do this and come in.
Right.
I mean, that's the kid's right to say that. At the same time, if he doesn't do that, nothing changes either. So it's all very twisted and tied up in a very non-linear, non-neat kind of way, where there are all these clashing motivations and emotions, but yeah, it finally comes together, which is great to see. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And I do think too, like this movie with the like Luke Wilson suicide sequence, which I
Yeah.
remember when I saw this in the theater, everyone was just like, gasping and things. But I think that is actually some of the most realistically uh disturbing is really the wrong word, but like impactful like sequences in any Wes Anderson movie. It feels very exposing of really
Yeah.
addressing something like very terrible, someone taking their own life. You see him trying to do that in a way that is more graphic than Wes Anderson. I mean, there's blood in this, and it's not like Phoenician Scheme, funny, half of the body exposed blood. Yeah, this is like a very serious suicide scene that stands out in a way that I think is important just in his canon
Hmm.
of like addressing this real emotion head on. Like he's not dancing around this. This is not trying to put an artifice around it. This is a very simple scene shot very, plainly. Like this could have been in a Scorsese film or something just very, direct of Luke Wilson, trying to kill himself in the film. And this also, I think, is just again a sign of this sort of more earnestness that has been again, like missing, I think, since Owen Wilson stepped away as a screenwriter. And obviously Owen Wilson's had a lot of problems with this same subject. And I just wonder if that is sort of the struggles that he was going into at the time, sort of writing that
Mm.
into the screenplay. But that scene, every time I see it, stands out to me as like, whoa, like, wow, Wes Anderson did this. Like, this does not at all seem like something he would do. And I say that as a compliment. I don't say that as a
Yeah,
knock. But I think it's very important to call out that scene, and that's why another reason why this film to me is that masterpiece canon because it is addressing that head on as opposed to through some non-direct way, which is usually what he does.
totally. And it's the triggering moment of the entire movie, right? Like
Hmm.
after
Hmm.
that is when things sort of start to fall in place. Yet again, there's no monologue or big speech or big scene to say, oh, what just happened? You sort of might almost feel in the moment that people are on and out with their lives after
Yeah.
such a traumatic event. However, something has changed forever
Right.
with these people. And I think that's important to call out. Otherwise, I don't think we get the ending we get if this
Hmm.
doesn't happen. So, but it's
Exactly.
earned. It's not, I kept thinking, you said Scorsese, which is a good comparison, actually, that this scene could be in the. I kept thinking of Darren Aronofsky, my friend. What would this movie be? What would this scene be? I was like, oh my gosh, that's what I was thinking of
Yeah.
watching this movie. But no, it's not tragedy porn. It's not,
Right.
heartache porn. It feels very earned, actually, in the
Hmm.
movie. So
Yeah,
this is like,
and surprising in the way that I think all the characters get
yeah,
surprised. The audience does too. It sort of comes out of nowhere,
comes out of
shot very
nowhere.
differently. You don't really know what's going on as he's starting to cut his hair, and then all of a
No.
sudden, boom! There's a razor blade, there's blood, and you're like, wait a second. I
And the
think
song behind
oh,
it. Oh my
oh,
gosh.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. The Elliott Smith song, who also,
Right.
committed suicide himself. And
Oh,
it's just,
really?
yeah, that scene is, I think, just one of his best scenes. It is not typically like you show that to someone out of context, they'd be like, that, there's no way that's Wes Anderson, right? But I did think it's important that it's in this film, and this film still is one of my favorites, and just I think his best use of soundtrack too. And I
Oh,
love the Hey Jude song in the beginning
oh,
too,
so
that version of
good.
that, which is, obviously the song, one of the best songs written about divorce, sort of opening the movie, and then yeah, it's just such a amazing film. I just love this movie so much. Um,
Yeah. Oh my
yeah,
gosh. And also the voiceover
yes, the Alec
from
Baldwin
Alec
narration.
Baldwin. That's
Yeah.
another beginning of sort of voiceovers in his movie, kind of
Hmm.
chapterized and narration. But I think here it sort of clicks in like a whole other way. It just feels so right to me. I can't explain it why. There's something about his voice quality and how the music is sort of laced with his voice. It just connects. It feels New York to me. I don't know why. It feels right.
Totally, totally. Oh, I guess the last thing I want to call it before we go to your masterpiece is this film has curtain call credits, but uniquely in the beginning, which I always thought was
True.
cool. Instead of at the end when they say the cast and announce who they are, it's like in the very first 6 minutes, they go into the opening title sequence and do the little curtain call stuff, which I just love that. You're seeing the whole cast of characters, and it's just so, yeah, so cool. This film really is something special every time I go back to it. So, with that, we'll go on to your masterpiece, which was another, again, like you said, there's so many ones that could be in this category. And this is another one that I think deserves in there too. So why don't you tell the listeners what you chose?
All right. So mine is the Grand Budapest Hotel from 2014. Of course, directed by Wes Anderson, starring Ray Fiennes, F. Murray Abraham, Tilda Swinton, murderer rows of actors.
Oh yeah, huge cast. Yeah.
This is where it really sort of starts to happen. But quick logline on the movie. A writer encounters the owner of an aging high-class hotel who tells him of his early years serving as a lobby boy in the hotel's glorious years under an exceptional concierge. So we've covered this movie before a couple of times, I think, but it's sort of funny to kind of look at his movies and his career in our new format of masterpieces. I was thinking about this. Like the two movies that we've picked sort of mark his two very distinct chapters. And then
Yeah,
there's stuff in between that sort of is a bridge between the two. So this
exactly.
is sort of, yeah. So like the way Tannenbaum is sort of is the peak of the early career, if you will. This sort of feels like the peak or maybe the beginning, however, so you want to call it, of the phase we are in right now,
Yeah.
where we're seeing the hyper highly artificial symmetry, production design, the mise-en-scène super controlled, mix of animation, build sets, miniatures,
Yeah.
amazing cast of characters, nested story structures, story within a story within a story.
Yeah.
All of that sort of gets introduced to us here, and it's like a Wes Anderson confetti bomb that just exploded in your face. But I think this is kind of the masterpiece of that era for sure, because yes, all those things are at play, but they're done so deftly. And there's something about just the joy and exuberance that this whole atmosphere, whether it's the literal pink color, which sort of became like a fashion statement because of this movie, I think, to Ray Fiennes' amazing career best performance in my mind, that you're drawn to this world. And even though you don't fully understand all the story structures, that, oh, they're in prison now, who is Willem Dafoe? Why are we on a chase on the ski slopes? Like, there's a lot of stuff that I forget about, and I watch it again, like, oh, yeah, this is in this too. Very well done, but then I'm going to forget about it again. But what it leaves you with is this joyous atmosphere that it creates. But then, as always, there's so much beneath the surface. Once again, we have our obsessive older man figure who's very particular, is sort of manipulating people, in this case, women over 80, typically. Uh, but at the
All
same time,
blondes,
all
right?
blondes,
Yeah.
exactly. At the same time, is there's something very endearing about him, and the central relationship, even though there's a lot of people in the movie, the central relationship here, and maybe that's why this movie works so well, is between Ray Fiennes and the lobby boy character. And there's something special there. It's sort of two misfits. Like, this is somebody, the lobby boy character is an immigrant from somewhere totally different, a totally different time, in a time where fascism is on the rise. But these two people who you would not even think of in the same sentence kind of build this friendship, but almost like a father-son like relationship, which is, if you don't think about it deeply, you wouldn't kind of get the emotion of it, but it's actually really deep. Like that, this relationship changed both of their lives, actually.
Right.
And that's sort of what's at the center with all of this stuff around it. It's a movie of love as well, because Lobby Boy character Zero falls in love with Saoirse Ronan, and that romance sort of is a tragic, excuse me, romance, and that's a big part of this movie as well. So I don't know. This is definitely a masterpiece. And the last thing I said before I hand it to you is that I think this is where the entire world also lined up to kind of see Wes, in all his glory. And I'm so happy that he has this moment of like a blockbuster movie. Like,
Yeah.
Wes is a brand, but he's an indie director, which
Right.
is sort of a crazy thing to say in the same sentence. But this is a blockbuster movie with a boatload of Oscar nominations, and I'm so glad that he has this moment in his career.
Oh, definitely. I think this is his highest grossing movie
Yeah,
by far too, which is incredible for him, who is not ever a big box office draw. He had a cult following for sure,
right.
but this really, you're right, broke through mainstream in terms of box office and also critically as well. So, yeah, this is a movie that I like more and more every time that I see it. I think the interesting thing that this movie does is it is almost his most like the artifice is most complicated and there's the most going on like with the production design with the aspect ratios, you mentioned all the different animation styles and there's so much which very easily could become overwhelming or bury any kind of heart in the film at all, and you could say this literally because there's so much surface in here, but at the same time, and I think a lot of this is due to, like you mentioned, Rafe performance in this.
Yeah,
There is then it does, you don't lose the message or the meaning behind the film, or at least through that storyline, and that is incredibly hard, line to walk
yeah.
because yeah, this movie definitely nails that piece of it as well. But every time I see it, and we talked about this a bit in the last time we mentioned this movie, which I think was the Ray Fiennes episode, that it becomes more and more to me what I, even though the Ray Fiennes storyline is amazing and that character is incredible and his relationship with Zero and it kind of keeps the plot moving forward, but there is that thing underneath about the love story piece,
Yeah.
where you find out at the end, Zero comes back and owns the hotel and is still there only because the one woman that he loved, his true love, they spent some time there and sometime they were a little happy and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And that this sort of overarching message of you can never really go back to the past. That the last line that the narrator has of like, yeah, the last time, I left the hotel in this year and I always wanted to go back, but yeah, I never made it back again. And that there are moments you can go through that are, still special and you might love it, but they're gone, they're fleeting. But you can always have those memories. And I think to me, that's what the movie kind of ends on. The love piece, but then also again the narrator kind of underlining that with his sentiment at the end, like I never saw the place again. I don't know,
Right.
there's some romance to that I like.
Totally. And the fact that it's in that building, in that hotel, and we see it's still very charming to me in its mid-century modern exterior, but it's not what it used to be. Then,
Right.
there's something about, there's almost like it's like a haunted version of the love that you once had, but yet it's beautiful in its own way, you know?
Right,
So there's
right.
that, and then it's the love with her, but also his love for Ray Fiennes' character
Hmm.
too, you know? Like the reason that he still sleeps in that same little half bed, even though he owns the hotel, is because it reminds him of that time of, being there and being a lobby boy. So, but it's not hit over the head once again, you know?
Right,
You can
right.
perceive this emotion or you might not, and you'll still have a great time watching this movie and thinking about Mendel's
Yeah.
confectionaries, but which I
Yeah.
still want to have
Oh my
someday.
God. Yeah, they should. They didn't. I went to that Wes Anderson cafe that I mentioned, but they did not have. They should have had
They
knockoff
didn't? Oh
Mendel's. No,
no.
no, no. They definitely should have had that. But it's also, you mentioned the charm of the hotel. There is a read of this movie too that because it is a story that someone is telling in a book based on a narrative that someone else told them. They were never there during the golden ages of going to Grand Budapest. And in fact, you could say unreliable narrator, maybe it never even looked like that. And
Yeah.
and what this amazing construction of Wes Anderson, it's just all what Zero has in his mind and how he
Yeah.
remembered the hotel because his true love was there and that time was spent there. But actually, maybe it always kind of looked like a dump. And
Yeah.
Wes is using his own, again, production design aesthetic as a way to, again, evoke potentially the theme of the time, these memories that you have.
Nostalgia.
Nostalgia, right, exactly, which I think is also brilliant. You don't have to read it like that, but you could read it like all of
I
this could
love that
actually
read
not
actually.
actually look like this, and it's all just in Zero's mind, and because he remembers this time that was so incredible in his life, because he had this love in his life or what have you, and yeah, well, you never really know because you never are there, and the narrator was never there during that time. All he hears is memories about it. So it is this, yeah, feeling a theme of nostalgia or memory, and these good memories, and how it's important to hold on to those
Yeah, I think that's a very smart read because this is why the movie uses animation and because
aspect
it's
ratios.
yeah,
Yeah.
aspect ratio because it sort of feels like a dream. It feels like a candy color dream that you're in, and then these adventures that they're going on, stealing the painting and going to these trains and all that, and maybe none of that happened, or if it did, maybe it was not as amazing and glorifying. Maybe it was more terrifying. Maybe
Right.
when,
Right.
the Nazis or whoever show up, maybe that was actually really bad, or maybe they didn't make it. Who knows, right? So, but yeah, I think that's a really smart read to it. But this is what West does. He's able to communicate such dense emotion, information, style and beauty, and that's why these movies, require, I think, repeat viewing. And this is definitely at the top of the list because, like some of these other movies that we talked about, where it's a little bit of an effort to go and watch them again. This is no effort. I could put this movie on at any time of the day. I often put this movie on when I'm on a plane ride with no sound because often your AirPods don't connect with the thing, and
Oh,
I
right.
never get the
Oh,
string
yeah, the
thing.
weird airport
So I
airline
just
headphone
watch
thing.
this on
Yeah.
silence,
Yeah.
as the plane is landing or whatever, and it's just beautiful. Just look
Yeah.
at.
No, absolutely. And it's like I know enough of the dialogue and so much of the
Yeah.
humor, even though it is like quips, but there's a lot of physical comedy in it,
Oh
and
yeah.
that is just
It's
so,
pretty manic actually in terms
yeah.
of it's very moved. There's no stillness in this movie at all,
Hmm.
actually, I think.
Right. Well, the flashbacks. I think the beginning of the
Right.
movie,
Yeah.
there is sort of like,
Purposefully.
yeah, which is again, I think part of what he's trying to do with that Russian doll aesthetic, which is even the other layer we didn't put on it, is this whole thing is just someone reading the book that the guy wrote. That
Right.
there's so many layers in that, which I think is at the time when I first saw it, I was a little bit like maybe we don't need this. Like honestly, I remember thinking that, but now the more I see it, the more I like that it is that nested aesthetic. And again, it goes back to this narrative, the narrative theme that I think is so important. And yeah, this movie, the more I watch it, the more I even love it. And there's so many Wes Anderson masterpieces. It's hard to sort of like talk about only two of them. But yeah, I'm glad we're talking about this again. I think for the third time, maybe. Yeah, I think the third time. So that's just what. And I think if listeners go back, and I'll post the links to the previous times we talked about him. we've covered different ground. It's not like we're repeating ourselves every
No,
single time because each time we rewatch it, we discover new things in these films because there's so
that's what
much
he
going on.
wants, you know.
Yeah,
So I think we're doing a good job there.
me too.
No, I love the whole Jude Law, F. Murray Abraham connection. Like it's so, I don't know, romantic and mysterious to me in this
Yeah,
hotel. It's like a silence to this hotel, and you're in these bats and you're having this conversation, and you're so drawn into who this person is, and just like F. Murray Abrams' face, and
yeah,
you can see this person has like been through a lot of stuff in his life, but still carries himself with this kind of air about him, but still feels kind of grounded and there's gravitas and it's just so great. Like, yeah, I love that aspect of the movie.
me too. He's so
All
good.
right. Should we move on to our wild cards?
Sure, let's do that. So I'll start then. My wild card is the Wes Anderson film Isle of Dogs from 2018. The IMDb plot summary set in Japan. Isle of Dogs follows a boy's odyssey in search of his lost dog. Like I said, directed by Wes Anderson, written by Wes Anderson along with Roman Coppola and Jason Schwartzman, starring the voices of Bryan Cranston, Edward Norton, Jeff Goldblum, among a bunch of others, Bill Murray and Greta
Scarlett
Gerwig,
Johansson.
etc. Scarlett Johansson, exactly. So this movie to me is a very unique movie in his filmography, and that's why I mentioned this as Wildcard. This is his second stop motion film, but I think this movie is missing a lot of the themes that Wes usually deals with, which is family dynamics, past traumas, families, not able to communicate. And it is what I think is his most political movie to date in terms of these themes, are very much about the rise of fascism, how to combat against that, the various ways you do that, all the different groups that work together but not exactly together, but different ways you combat it, the othering of different parts of society, outcasts, minorities, and these are all things that are very like, big and heady themes that he has never really addressed. This isn't like personal. Yes, there is a little personal stuff in this movie too, where you can read it as the dog, who was astray and then he gets found and etc. But to me, this movie, I remember seeing this when I first saw it and being like, "Whoa! Like this is not a political allegory. Like normally, this is definitely nothing West would go near at all." And he's kind of woven this political themes into the movies since then in little ways. Like you mentioned, some of the stuff in Asteroid City and even Phoenician Scheme. Like I said, it's a little bit about, anti-capitalist, etc. But these are not things that West typically ever touches. And that's why to me this movie was such a shock when I saw it. But not in a way where I didn't like the film, where it felt like this is outside of his wheelhouse. It just felt like very like hitting the nail on the head of yeah, like this is what can happen, and why what are the dangers of fascism and how these movements can kind of take over and what can happen to the minorities or the other who gets othered in society. In this case, it's the dogs that do. But you can obviously put mirrors on, Nazi Germany or, even now in in present day America, there's a lot watching this. I'm like, oh man, like this feels too relevant all of a sudden. But yeah, that's why this is my wild card, and we'll get into more of the film, which I do really like a lot in a bit. But yeah, what is your experience with Isle of Dogs? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, no, when I saw it, because it was stop motion and I love the previous stop motion movie, the name of which is
Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Fantastic
I
Mr.
know you did that
Fox.
as a test to
Yes.
me, not because you forgot it, so I passed. Don't worry.
Great, exactly. You did great.
Thank you.
So I don't know. I sort of went in with that expectation, and I
Yeah.
had not read anything about the movie. I had no clue what this was about. So I will say, when I first watched it, of course, those themes were pretty strong, but I think I was just so jarred by the
Yeah.
experience of the themes of the movie because they're so unexpected, and especially with stop motion. I just was like, and it's dogs. Dogs are cute. And I was like, oh, he's gonna do something like Fantastic Mr. Fox. And in this world, and then Japan is like makes sense. It's such a detail-oriented world, which is what
Mhm.
Wes is, and of course, all that is there in the movie. But I was sort of, I don't know, I was too startled by it to
Yeah.
fully appreciate it. And then I remember, this is the irony of it, right? Like the entire discourse, as I remember it about this movie when it came out, was that why is this director who's not Japanese making a movie set in Japan?
Oh
And
yeah. I forgot about
it
that
was
actually until
all
you
that
just
people
mentioned
talked
it,
about
right?
was that.
That's right. Yeah.
And So, which is sort of silly to me anyway,
Yeah,
but like
agreed.
watching it this time again, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is why things happen the way they do in the world, because that is not the point of the movie. The point of the movie is exactly the opposite, which is what you made, which is that people who are, whether it's minorities or whoever in peril, like how they get sequestered and how, you know, the powers that be sort of invent the things to support them, their lives or whatever agenda they have. And so, first of all, who cares who's telling what story? But
Right,
it's
right.
actually telling a story which is very much the story that, the people who were mad about the movie are in line with. So, what's the problem? It just shows how silly all of this can be, right?
Hmm.
So anyway, I sort of got lost in a little bit of all of that, and it was such a treat to go back to this movie to watch it. Obviously admired the great stop motion work that's put into this. Like the detail of it is absolutely incredible, which of
Hmm.
course you expect that from a Sanderson movie. But this movie surprised me in spite of that, because it's such a detailed world in Japan, and then this sort of Isle of Dogs where all these people, the dogs are. It's just so beautifully, and detail orientedness of it is just unmatched in my mind. The voice performances are on a whole other level in my mind. From the very beginning, these people lose themselves in these characters, I think, totally.
Yeah.
Just the way it happened in Fantastic Mr. Fox too. So that was incredible to see. The themes you already mentioned, they're handled again in classic West way. Yes, he's seeing meeting these themes directly, but they're not hitting you over the head.
Right.
It's a very character-driven piece where you're basically with them. You're with the dogs in their journey's adventure story. You almost kind
Yeah.
of lose kind of what might be happening, which feels very real, right? Like if you're running and trying to survive, then that's what you're doing. You're not thinking about the other stuff that's going on. Then you have the journey of the little boy who's there to find his dog, which again, the backdrop is one thing, but from his point of view, it's about the dog that he's
Right.
looking for. And that's just so sweet and tender. Then you're with Greta Gerwig and the scientist and the journalist and all of these people who are on their own journeys. And then in classic West fashion, even the main guy who's the politician or whatever, the bad guy,
Yeah.
ends up having a redemption arc, because when he sees this amazing act of kindness from, or bravery rather, from his son, or not son, but like
Adopted
he's his
son.
uncle.
Yeah.
Yeah, adopted, exactly.
Adopted. Right, right, right. Yeah. Yeah.
His
Nephew, I
uncle,
guess.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That he has a change of heart, and suddenly he's like, you know what? I'm going to drop all of these lies, and the dogs are welcome back, and we got to kind of do the right thing. And so, it's amazing how all this is handled. I will say my only sort of knock on the movie is that maybe I'll feel differently if I watch it another time, but it sort of ends in a pretty little bow that now the kid is sort of the leader of this place and everything is fine. That doesn't work that way in real life, and it's also not typical of West to do. So I was a little bit sort of surprised and questioning on that, like because as we've been saying, like his movies are all about subtle catharsis.
Yeah.
And it would have been fine if the main guy, the uncle politician, sort of has this awakening, but maybe he continues to be, or maybe somebody else steps in. I don't know, but it's getting better, but not entirely there. I would have sort of preferred that, but this sort of ties it all too neatly. But
Mm.
other than that, I think this movie is incredible. I'm so glad that you put it on the list too, because I probably wouldn't have seeked it out again, just given how I was sort of cold on it the first
Mm.
time I watched it. It's amazing, I think. It's so good.
Yeah, I hadn't seen it. I saw it in theaters, and again, like I said, I was a little jarred by the difference in his canon. And then I maybe saw it once after that, but it's been
Mm,
several years. And this actually shot up a lot in my appreciation in this rewatch, just coming to it after
same.
kind of stepping away for so long. And I actually kind of like that. Yeah, in terms of what you're saying around tying into a bow, I mean, this movie does also feel like his only, or at least most kids' movie in a way, even though these are obviously very serious themes, fascism, all the stuff that's going on. But I kind of feel like when in a kid's sort of allegory storybook
Mm,
about, fascism and how to defeat it and what happens in the end. You kind of need like a very neat happy ending to this, which is
Mm,
sort of how I kind of chalk it up to that. But yeah, you're right. This is not actually how it actually would work. Especially with the change of heart of the bad, the politician. But I think for what this movie is trying to do and the that it is, I think, at least how I read it, is try to be like more of a kid's story. That to me, it doesn't bother me that much, but I get what you mean. Like it's also atypical of him. He usually does
yeah,
not do this in any film.
never.
There's always some thing that isn't fully resolved or feels more
Yeah.
realistic. But maybe too because this movie does deal with such serious things. I mean, there's so many things in this movie that it's like, oh, they're like pushing all the minorities into a ghetto on this trash island and making up lies. I love when the little boy like crashes on the island, like, oh, the dogs have kidnapped him and they're vicious and they're attacking him. It's like, well, no, he actually crashed. But how the media lies about things and it's so maybe he had to have it be a little more of a neat little bow in the end because of the different stuff. But yeah, it is it still just hits. And like I said, especially in today, with
Yeah, very prescient, I guess.
yeah,
Yeah.
like, oh, we're deporting this student and taking her visa away because she's speaking out against the government. I'm like, oh, that literally, like I saw that in the news last night. Like that's happening in America and it happened in this movie, like, 7 years ago or whatever this was, which was yeah, interesting to see how we're now catching up to fascist dystopias that are shown in films. We're now living in it. But no, this movie, like, really, I think is very unique in a positive way though now in his canon. I think this does stand out, but in a way that I think will only grow in appreciation, at least for me, over time as a great, yeah, kids political allegory more than anything else. And I love that Wes stepped into this and used the stop motion tech, which is so awesome, and just really, I hope he does another stop motion film at some point, because he's really one of the last masters of that craft. And yeah, this movie is. If folks haven't also seen this, because I don't feel like it was did very well necessarily, or
No.
is talked about very much. It's not a tip. It's not at all a typical Wes Anderson movie. Even the way the Fantastic Mr. Fox, even though it is stop motion as well, feels a lot more like Wes Anderson in terms of the themes that it's dealing
Right.
with. This movie is definitely something that I highly recommend folks seek out, and I'm glad you appreciate it more on the rewatch in the
Yeah.
same way that I did, because
I
I knew
loved
this
it.
felt different. And but would it be different bad now because it's been so long? But no, actually, it's different, even better than I remember. Is sort of how I would classify it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Okay, so my wild card, which is our last movie of the day, is Darjeeling Limited from 2007, directed by Wes, of course, written by him, Roman Coppola, Jason Schwartzman, starring Owen Wilson, Adrian Brody, Jason Schwartzman, and of course, many other people. Quick logline: a year after their father's funeral, three brothers travel across India by train in an attempt to bond with each other. So I think we covered this movie before. I'm forgetting what episode that was, but it was on your
Travel.
list.
Yeah, it was a
Yeah,
travel episode.
travel.
Yep.
Right, exactly. And that's the first time I'd watched this movie,
That's right. That's right.
and I appreciated it, but like with several Wes's movies, I was sort of distracted by the production and being in India, this amazing train and the performances and everything that was going on, that I don't think I fully took it, other than the fact that it did feel quite different from the rest of his movies. It felt, dealing with grief and sort of serious topics in like a very head-on kind of way. And it, in a way, even felt at times like this was not a West movie because it
Mm.
doesn't have some of the signature things that you expect, especially looking at it from, a Budapest lens and the lens that we've been living in now, which is sort of where I was more at that time because I hadn't watched the previous movies, many, many times. But watching this movie this time, I don't know what it was about it and the state of mind I was in. It just sort of blew me away completely to the point that now for me, this is sort of in his masterpiece
Hmm.
kind of set of movies of because not only is this movie creating this amazingly rich and detailed, beautiful world of being in India, and listeners don't know, I grew up there. It captures something so magical and beautiful and almost unsayable about the place where there's chaos and anything sort of happens, but yet there is beauty and sort of almost like self-effacing kindness of people, that they are there to do whatever and they'll invite you in no matter what, and things will work themselves out no matter what. It sort of captures that again in a way that's not said but just shown to us in its actions. So I feel like that just blew me away. I mean, there's so many movies made about India by people who are not from there. And I haven't watched like other movies that I know Wes was influenced by,
Yeah. Yeah.
like Renoir's movie and what have you. But this movie sort of captures like the soul of India in such a beautiful way. So that sort of really hit me. And then, what is common about this movie with all other Western movies is sort of this relationship at the center of it, which is these three brothers trying to mourn the loss of their father, but really also trying to mourn the loss of their relationship and find a way to connect it back. And I think that arc is sort of handled so beautifully in this movie, where there's Owen Wilson's character who's almost trying to be the glue of the whole thing, 'cause he's the elder brother. And all of
Yep.
these schemes to kind of bring these people together, and the ultimate scheme of going to see their mom, who's also sort of betrayed them. He's that guy, but it's not real. None of this stuff. It's not heartfelt. He's just trying to make it all happen. Adrian Brody is sort of this almost like lost soul drifter kind of guy who's unsure, unclear of where he even is. And Jason is sort of the younger one who's just horny and is, trying to once again, they're all lost souls. And then they come together, but in the most unexpected way. Part of that is the trip, part of that is being in India and its sort of chaoticness. And then there's like a pivotal moment that happens in the movie where a little kid, an Indian kid, kind of loses his life. And first of all, these three brothers come together to try to save these kids, and they've never done anything together in an organic way. It's all been forced, and they've sort of been missing each other, sort of ships missing each other in the light. They finally organically come together to do this, and even though they save some of the kids, one of the kids is lost, and that changes them forever, I think. And that sort of is the triggering event to come together, and kind of live their dad's legacy. So I don't know. This movie sort of blew me away. I was so emotional, kind of throughout the movie, of just watching this relationship unfold. At the same time, masterfully made, like all West movies are. So I know you were already a fan of this movie before, so I'm
Yeah.
catching up to you.
Yeah, yeah. I really, at the time, like I said when we talked about before, I really liked this movie when I first saw it, even though it was not very critically well received,
No,
or even by West fans when it first came out. And there was a lot of talk of like, because this is also after Life Aquatic, which is a bit of a misfire, and then this other one, and they were like, okay, well, maybe his thing is played out. But this movie's always been really like powerful to me. I mean, it's a pretty, simple story of like, again, three brothers who don't get along and they're all dealing with different things. Owen Wilson's character tried to kill himself. And
again, yeah,
Schwartzman's character, I know, which is interesting just again to see. Movie came out, I think, right after his actual suicide attempt or around that. So
well,
something obviously, and he didn't write this movie, unlike the other ones, but just very interesting to see that. And Jason Schwartzman dealt with a horrible breakup, and then Adrian Brody's character can't deal with his dad's death. So they all have these things that they're carrying with them. But like you said, until they try to save three brothers or one of those little kid brothers dies, I think that is when the first time they not only are trying to do something together, but there is a gravity of like, oh well, brother has passed away in front of them, and
this
then they
matters.
exactly our relationships now matter, and that they're able to be the brothers to themselves that they really weren't able to do through this entire film. Even Owen Wilson, who we're doing all these things like you said that are very surface level. Oh, we're in India, which is supposed to be some, like a lot of people go there and try to like become a spiritual place. Or like now we have these feathers we have to like wave around, and it's like that isn't actually what you need to do. You need to sit down and actually talk about what's going on in each of your lives directly to each other instead of this he told me about this about you. Is this true? And like they're all kind of like gave this game of
Right.
telephone, and there's all these sort of artificial things that are going on. And it's not until that horrible death of the Indian boy, and then like they're able to actually start talking to one another. Owen Wilson actually removes the bandages and shows the pain that is under him, and is not embarrassed
Hmm.
about that in front of his brothers anymore. And it's just a it's just through these actions, like I was saying about West, it's not on the dialogue. They're not really able to talk to each other, but through these actions that you're seeing is enough where by the end of the movie, I mean, I love the final scene of this film where throughout the whole film they're carrying the I mentioned this in the last time we talked about the movie too, but I'm a little repetitive, but they're carrying these literal baggage of their dad. And in the very end, they jump onto the train and throw
Right.
it all
And
away so they can catch it. And one of the brothers helps one of the brothers onto the train. So now they're working together. And I think it's Jason Schwartzman's character literally waves goodbye to their old luggage. That is the baggage emotional that they've left behind. And then the movie's over and they go back into the car and you don't really like there isn't tied up in a bow, like you said, of like where are they going? What's
right.
happening now? It doesn't really matter because they've gotten rid of the baggage and now they're real brothers again. And it's just it's all, I mean, I really love this movie a lot.
It's
I don't know
beautiful.
why
And
people don't, honestly.
I don't understand why. I mean, I get, and the ending, like as you're saying, I know it can come off as a bit corny or too on the
Maybe.
nose,
Yeah.
but I think it works because I think it's earned in the journey that they've been on, the journey we've been on, in the kind of the artifice that he's created.
Hmm.
Because the train is also an artifice, right? In a way that you're kind of
Yes.
stuck on it, and for long stretches of time, you don't even know where you're at. You're sort of lost. All you have is what it is. It only moves in one direction. It's sort of a linear thing. You're moving sort of in one direction. It's not like a circular thing where you can sort of go back and talk to each other. So there's a lot of like metaphorical stuff that is play, and then the only way you could end it is this way, like, because it is a very metaphorical sort of movie, I think. So I think the ending totally works.
Hmm.
And performance wise, this again, I think it's sort of at the same level to me as the Tannenbaum's performances, where
Yes.
these people feel really real, yet they're cut from the Wes Anderson cloth, but they feel real people. And you empathize and you're drawn to all of them, in a way. They're sort of one person. And I don't know how he's done that. They don't look alike, but they sort of feel like images of each other and complement each other. And we get a little bit of a sense of their father, but I almost was like this time watching it that, oh, are they all supposed to just represent
Mm.
different facets of the dad, and that all of them coming together is sort of what the dad is? I don't
Mm.
know. But
Yeah. Yeah.
so it's a very deep movie, but also a very fun movie. It's a great adventure movie, and being in a different place, all the crazy characters that you meet. And once again, these people are not famous people. They are, just some Indian actors. They're actually British Indian actors.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah.
So it's sort of fun to see that. Yeah, this movie kind of blew me away.
Yeah, it's also so great about this film too that like they filmed it like on location, and I could see a Wes Anderson and maybe a Wes Anderson of today. Actually, Phoenician Scheme, right, takes place in the Middle East in some nondescript Middle Eastern country, and
Right,
all of the places they go look very Wes Anderson staged.
right,
Like it's a Max Fisher who's the character of Rushmore play. It doesn't
right,
look like they're actually in, Jordan or Lebanon or what have you. Whereas this, he's not doing that with India. This looks like these characters are actually there in the markets, and they're not like a heightened Wes Anderson version of an Indian market. No, they're Indian market. They look like, normal Indians there. They're not some Wes Anderson exaggerated version of it. And the train,
no,
yeah, the train cars inside, maybe, yes, they're a little Wes Anderson-y, but it feels like a real world, which grounds the movie and makes the emotions feel more real and more
totally.
accessible what these characters are going through because yeah, these are three guys who are going on a trip to actual India. This isn't some soundstage that is Wes Andersonized, which I
Totally.
just always love that about this movie. There's this realism to it that
Realism to it, totally.
is
Yet it's sort of
awesome.
metaphorical, and
Exactly.
and the train, from what I understand, like they actually found real train compartments, but obviously
Oh,
kind of rebuilt them, constructed them so that you could make a movie in them. So at some point in some past era, maybe such train compartments existed. Of course, I've never seen them, but
right,
yeah.
right. I'd love to go on that train. I also just
I
want to
know.
call out too, like two of my favorite lines in a Wes Anderson film were in this film. The one is when the boy passes, like they're trying to save these three kids, and one of them
Hmm.
dies, and Adrian Brody's character said, "I didn't save mine." Just
Hmm.
so simple and not like again, he's not
Breaks
crying
you.
like, "Oh no, my kid, I can't." It's just like that hits me every time. And then I
It's
also
yeah,
love the scene where there's an attack that happens on the train car where they all kind of get maced and they come back and Owen Wilson, or sorry, Jason Schwartzman is talking to the woman that he's kind of had a fling with, and he's like, "Oh, did you get maced too?" And she's like, "No, I'm crying." And it's like, again, that's all you
yeah,
kind of need to say, like all this emotion that she's kind of going
yeah.
through. It just, I love those two. I think just really hit this Wes Anderson thing on the head, where he's not doing these big speeches, putting the heart on their sleeve, but there's so much there behind those two. Those two lines are some of my favorites in his films. I
Yeah,
just, this film is awesome.
it's
I didn't really
amazing.
understand why this was so attacked at the time, and really needs to be talked about alongside these other films that we put as our masterpieces. Honestly, like this is right
Yeah,
up in that category.
yeah. And the Adrian Brody thing reminds me of like, because he's dealing with, because he's going to be a dad and he sort of has complicated feelings about that. So that sort
Yep.
of lands even further because he's hasn't gone over his, losing his dad.
Yeah.
So being a dad is complicated for him. So, and then suddenly holding this kid's body in his arms, like that would be such a jarring experience for anybody. But I think for him, it's even deeper. But all he says is that, which is, and he's sort of like a zombie after that a little bit.
Mhm.
But then the way he shows the villagers and how they react at first, they're angry. By the way, Irfan Khan is in it, who's the
Yeah.
dad of the kids, who's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. He's so
Just with
good.
the look, he's able to communicate the anger and the sadness. But then later on, learning that, oh no, they actually have to save the kids, and then they're invited back.
Yeah.
And that's just so moving and sweet to me. And once again, like we were saying earlier, it's a realization that, oh, this matters, this relationship matters, but also seeing just strangers being kind to them. I think
Hmm.
that does something because up till then, they're tourists, right? Like
Yes,
as
that's
one would
true.
be
You're
in
right.
any place that, oh, I want to buy the stuff, I want to buy the snake, or I want to
That's,
buy
yeah.
whatever drugs that they're popping because you can buy over-the-counter medication, which is like so funnily done in the movie. They're all like,
They're popping so many
not
pills.
popping pills, not communicating, whatever. They're just
Right, right.
tourists, and then something sort of deep happens, and it's not like the place broke them. It's sort of something otherworldly happened that brought them together. And then
Hmm.
the feather sequence actually makes sense when
Right,
it
right.
does work
Yeah,
because it's
exactly.
heartfelt, it's earned. It's not just a gesture, it's not just, a surface level thing that's supposed to weave its magic. Because
Yeah,
spirituality is within us, it's and yes, some places have certain auras and we see
totally.
that about India too, in the kindness of the villagers, that
Oh
that is
yeah,
the spirituality that you see, but you have to also make effort to get there. And these
exactly.
guys end up doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, just a great film, and people, if
Great
they
film.
haven't seen it because they heard it wasn't good, you heard wrong because it is great. Well, yeah. So now we've talked all about our six of the films of Wes. A lot of repeats because that shows you again how much we are fans of his. So as fans, Karan, what would you like to see Wes Anderson do now that he's released Phoenician Scheme?
Yeah, I mean, I think I like that he's back on like a more linear structure story. I think I would like him to stick to that. Maybe go to a world which is obviously beautifully constructed and staged the way he does right now, but maybe bring just a little bit more realism in
Hmm.
it. I think that's the combination. I don't want him to go all the way back to these earlier movies, but just a little bit more realism would be good, but keep it linear. Work with his band of troops, but maybe bring some old ones back. Maybe bring Owen Wilson back, or maybe find an unexpected person that we would not expect in a Wes Anderson movie. I can't think of who that might be. I read somewhere he has wanted to work with Jodie Foster his entire career.
Oh, really? Interesting.
That would
Huh.
be really interesting and fun. Like she said
Yeah.
no every time.
Oh,
And
really?
so, yeah, I don't know why,
Huh.
but that would be interesting. In fact, the Mia Tripleton work with Kate Winslet. I think
Oh,
that would be
yeah.
incredible. Like she's one of the best.
Oh, yeah. Like a mother-daughter, literal mother-daughter tale or something.
That would be
Um,
amazing.
yeah,
What
yeah.
about you? Yeah.
No, yeah, it's I mean, I want him to continue doing what he's doing. Like I'm not someone who is tired of his
No.
style or his aesthetic. I want to see more of that. I mean, it's not like anyone else is doing it either. He didn't sort of set a trend where all these people are sort of doing other things. So once he decides not to make films anymore, we will lose something. So I want him to continue to give us that because we can't get that anywhere else. And what I really liked about Phoenician Scheme was the fact that it was just so funny. And I would love to see him do something that is even more comedic. I mean, Bottle Rocket, I think, is basically just like a lighthearted comedy more
Yeah,
than anything else. And then over the time, he's had more dramatic elements, even though he's kept comedy in there. And Grand Budapest, I think, is absolutely hilarious, obviously.
hilarious.
But
Yeah,
there is that somberness to it that kind of frames it. Something that is more of just a all and out comedy, closer to something like Phoenician Scheme. I like to see him do, but I'm excited to see whatever he does next. I will be there opening weekend, which is always so fun. Every
same.
time I go, it's always a big theater full of Wes Anderson fans, and that is also a really unique experience that I think is fun too. That he can bring that very few directors, at least, can bring out
Totally.
in this way.
Totally. And yeah, I just want people not to take it for granted, you know? I
Definitely
think that's
not.
starting to happen and it makes me a little sad. So no, he's special and this may not go on forever. So enjoy
Exactly.
it.
Well, it definitely won't. I mean, at some
No,
point, he, unfortunately, will stop
right.
making movies. So, but yeah, and in terms of what's next, I know we talked about this on our last episode, but we'll be taking a short break, just with real life kind of getting in the way for both of us. We won't come back in 2 weeks. We'll definitely be coming back in July with same format, covering another big movie that's coming up that we'll be excited to talk about, and hopefully you guys come back and join us for that. And again, just want to plug, we went to the Criterion Closet recently. There's a video up on your YouTube. So if you're still continuing just to listen to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or any podcast platform, just check out our YouTube page. You find some fun things there that are really, really cool and something that I think is experience that we enjoy that we want to be sharing with all you guys.
Totally. That was so fun. Well, with that, that's our episode. As always, we are available everywhere on podcasting platforms, obviously on YouTube. Let us know what you thought of our Wes Anderson selections. What are your favorites? What do you think of his new movie? And as always, please rate us, like us, subscribe to us, because that really helps new folks find us. So, yeah, until July, see you next time.
See you next time.